Hello, dear listeners. If you're new here, we're Margin Mavens, and we are obsessed with writing in our books and sharing our thoughts with you guys. In this episode, we are talking about Last Sacrifice by Richelle Mead, the sixth book in the Vampire Academy series. Rose has been framed for the murder of Queen Tatiana and is awaiting trial. She knows she didn't do it, we know she didn't do it, so who did? As always, we will be talking about plot points and spoilers, so you have been warned. Now, let's get into it. How we feeling, Kayla?
Boy, howdy. I hate you for making me read this series. I struggled so hard to get through this. See, and I told you. You were like, we can stop reading it. It's okay. And I'm like, no, we're going to finish it. And I'm glad we did. Because out of all of the books, Last Sacrifice is hands down my favorite one.
Hmm.
It's so well balanced. It felt too long sometimes, but like there was so much to go over and to like come to terms with that was really, really good. And like I liked the fact that like we got a proper ending. Like a proper everything wrapped up for the most part. And a neat little bow and a cute little package. And
They
it's
did
like,
leave
okay.
those open spots though for
Or yeah,
like
the
Jill and
following series.
Eddie and
Yeah. Which is fine. Like it's fine. I just, I paint the picture in my head on what they're doing. It's fine. It's no big deal. Um, but like from the get, right? Like, ah, Abe, Abe had me cackling throughout this whole book because at the start of the book, he strolls in with some magazines for Rose and the Count of Monte Cristo.
Yep.
And I'm like, girl, he's telling you.
He's trying to warn you.
He's trying to warn you. Like, I picked it up immediately. Like, out of all of the books,
In the world.
all of the books that you could have given this girl in the entire world, you give her the Count of Monte Cristo. I haven't even read that book, and I know what it's about. Like,
Yeah, it's a good one.
please, it's I just and then everything pops off. So, for those that are listening, there is essentially a jailbreak happening, where, and it's just so good the way that they do it. But they've decided, and by they I mean like Abe, Christian,
Lisa,
Eddie,
Mikael,
all
or Michael.
yes.
I was gonna say it's Spanish, but he's Romanian, so I
You
don't.
can't. Yeah. They all decide that they are going
Dimitri,
to
Adrian.
Dimitri especially, okay, decides that they're going to break Rose out of jail. And the best time to do so is when they're in the process of preparing to bury Queen Tatiana. Because there's a whole, as you would expect, there's a whole thing. It's a whole process. It's a whole procession.
Yeah,
Through
pallbearers.
Yeah, and they use actual literal explosives.
C4, guys. They brought in
They
C4.
use actual C4 to
yeah
to cause a distraction long enough to break Rose out and get her out of court. And then there's Abe, who's like, "Don't worry, I
have
I'm
under
gonna
good
make
authority
a gate for you. There's gonna be a gate for you." And then there's an explosion, and there's just a hole in the wall that it's good. It's so good. It's so good. And Rose is just like, what is going, like, she's trusting them because these are people that she trusts with her life.
The turns have tabled, really, because she's like, oh, it's usually me leading these.
Yeah, I'm usually the one doing wild stunts like this. Like, what do you mean? So then she's free with Dimitri and Sydney. Yes, Sydney's driving this whole thing. And of course, Rose is stubborn as can be.
Because, well, I think defending Rose a little bit, she is incredibly stubborn, but she is coming from a place of like, these are really high stakes. Everybody needs to not be helping me. I can handle, you know,
Right.
whatever is coming kind of thing. She's like, nobody else should stay with me. Like, you've got me out. Let me go do my thing. And you guys can presume innocence or whatever. You know, other than
Which is
Dimitri,
not
he would have to go
happening.
into hiding and, you know,
Yeah.
all the
Which is
things.
not happening. Like, it's not happening.
There's a scene. So I use sticky notes again. So I'm just gonna pull the sticky notes out as I do them, so I don't leave the adhesive in my book. Because for a fun fact for everybody, if you were leaving anything in any sort of paper, right, you have to make sure you are using the right type of adhesive sticky notes, or else it will tarnish your books. Anyways, Dimitri, right? Because Rose's whole thing is like, I can do this myself, and Dimitri has a really like, I think Dimitri post Strigoi is so much more interesting because he's
Yes.
more dimensional now. He's not so like
Yes.
stoic. So he says
Yes.
to her, and he's like, hey, like, you know that I have never let you down in terms of your safety. Right. And she's like, okay, but if we're going to do this, like, it's no longer teacher student. Like, I am your equal now. And he's almost like surprised by it. And he's like, Rosa, you've like always been my equal.
Yeah.
And it was the fact that she didn't
She
clock.
never considered that.
Yeah, she didn't clock it, but also like in present tense where she's dating Adrian, but because Dimitri told her that he didn't love her anymore, he couldn't be with her. The fact that she doesn't like stop in that moment and go, okay, homie, if we're setting the boundaries, we're not together, you don't want to be together, you cannot call me this. You know, like those are boundaries I
Right.
would have set. But once again, she's 18 years old. Everything messy that happens in this book is because she's 18.
18. Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
so that was really fun, right? So they end up at a motel, and Rose, in true Rose fashion, ruins it for everyone because she
Breaks out.
breaks out. Mind you, the way that she breaks out is she kisses him, right? And he kisses
Yeah.
her back, and then she clocks him in the face. And she
Yep.
manages to get out of the motel room. But not only does she get out of the motel room, she runs through the lobby saying, there's a man chasing me. And
Yep.
gets out, uses that time, mind you, of sneaking out to not get farther away. She uses it then to spy on Lisa, which, once again, 18 years old. Like, she's not thinking like, oh, he's gonna still be chasing me. And so he eventually brings her back. And I love that even though it was obviously at a really annoying moment for him, he's still showing some like amusement and like love basically towards her, because he's like, did you really have to tell the guy in the lobby to call the cops?
Yeah.
And so
And Sydney's annoyed because
yeah,
she's like, man, I'm doing all of this
and you undid
because
it.
I owe Abe a favor.
Yep.
And you ruin it. Like, I had everything set. Everything was great. Everything was fine.
And you messed it up.
And here comes Rose freaking Hathaway
Yep.
to mess it all up.
There's also a point before they get to the motel where they split up in a mall, and Rose ends up having to take down a guardian, right? And Dimitri's very like nonchalant upon the reunion, and she's almost like, excuse me, can you ask me about the encounter I just had? You know, because she still wants the
She
praise
wants
from him.
praise.
Yeah, she wants the
Yep.
praise from him. You know, she wants him to see her in like a positive light, right? Because in her mind, he doesn't right now. Like, he's like, I don't have love for you. I want you to be safe, but that's it. And he specifically says, like, you took down your enemy, you did it fast, and you did it well because you're just that good, right? And you see that he has 100% embraced that, like, we're equals now, you know? And not just that, but he has fought against her in like a genuine way. You know, he remembers being a Strigoi with all of those advantages, and her still getting like one-upping him each time, which, I don't know. I feel like I would not have the willpower to tell someone I didn't love them if they were able to beat me when
Beat
I'm
the
like
crap
that.
out of me.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Um and so we got a lot of uh moving parts, right? So he specifically tells her, like, I don't need luck. I'll always be able to find you, right? And that was such a like Strigoi Dimitri statement that I was like, he's
Mhm.
never going to be able to fully shake his awareness of himself past that point.
Right.
But it makes him more interesting because he doesn't do it in like a creepy way, you know? He's just like,
Mhm.
I'm self-aware enough to know that there's nowhere you can go that I will not find you. Um,
It's such an like the whole storyline is so fascinating, and it just wraps everything up so well. Like,
mhm,
right? Like you get to see Rose and Dimitri sort of like help each other heal, right? Like especially Dimitri and his view of the world
mhm.
post Strigoi. Like they have this really beautiful scene in an alleyway where he's like struggling something fierce because he has to dip back into that Strigoi uh, mindset and behavior to be able to get them information. And, she's like, listen, you have to find the beauty in the world. And he just looks at her and just says, your
Finds the beauty.
hair.
Yep.
And it's just, I hate Richelle Mead for making me actually like the two of them together.
Ah.
Like, I hate it so much.
Yep.
But
Yep.
just,
There's also a scene though that we definitely need to talk about where they end up at a library because she has a moment of like, is this what my life is going to be like if this doesn't work? Like, am I just going to be in hiding all the time? There's so many places I didn't get to see. And he takes her to a library and there's like 10 books in their travel section because they're in the
yeah,
middle of Huckleberry and
nowhere.
Finn.
Yeah.
And they're like looking through like 100 places to visit in the world or whatever, and
Hmm.
looking through it and stuff like that. And he's helping her, but then she ends up needing to help him as well because he looks at St. Petersburg and he has that moment of like, oh, like I would also
Yeah.
probably not be able to go back here. And it's just it was so sweet and so domestic. And he specifically says something which like he slips in things so nonchalantly, right?
He truly does.
Where he's like, "Oh, like I want to embrace things in life, right? I want to embrace like the smell of these books and the perfume you wear." And I'm like, "Okay, dude, you can't tell her you don't love her and then
I
like
know.
say this
I know.
thing, you know?" So the fact that Rose
Yeah.
was like surprised is crazy to me. Mind you, my biggest issue with this book, right, is
Don't
Rose
get me
is
started.
still with Adrian.
Adrian. Yep.
And Adrian is
Has
doing
no. Well, no. Okay.
speak your
Yes,
truth.
but also Adrian should have known better.
Yeah. That's what I've been
Yeah, I know.
saying.
I know. I know you've been saying it, and now I'm saying it.
Yeah. You
He
don't
was an
listen.
idiot.
You don't
He
send
should
your
have known better.
girlfriend off on an
Oh,
adventure with
oh.
the ex-boyfriend that you know she's
And then
struggling to get
expect
over.
everything to go well? Absolutely not. No.
Yeah. I think
Come
like
on now.
and I think he gives so fast forwarding a little bit, but we will come back. Rose and Dimitri end up reconciling and getting together during this trip, right? Which everybody knew was going to happen. You can't
Yeah.
have them in
You
close
can't put the two
quarters
of them together and then expect that not to
without
happen.
supervision. They were left unsupervised, And
Yeah.
so what's really frustrating to me is because that Rose did love Adrian. She had love for him. You know that she cared about
Mhm.
him. Like her
Mhm.
feelings towards him were very genuine. When he came to her in her dreams, like she was genuinely happy to see him. It is not
Yes.
like I think like
That
other
wasn't fake.
yeah, it's not like other relationships in literature or in media or in life where somebody is in a relationship they don't want to be in and that is why they cheat or anything like that. She's in a tough situation because I truly believe that by the end of Spirit Bound, right, she was fully committed to Adrian because she had been told by
Mhm.
Dimitri, like, this is not going to happen. And
Right.
if the queen would not have been murdered, right, um, she and Adrian would have at least worked on their stuff together. Not saying they would have stayed together because they were fundamentally incompatible, right? But it would not have
Mm-hmm.
happened in the way that it
That it
happened
did.
here. Okay. So we get introduced to a quirky group of people, right? Who live in caves. And I believe they're called keepers, right? And
Yes.
they are basically
Mm-hmm.
keeping the old traditions of the Moroi alive,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have their leader
Mm-hmm.
has a Moroi wife, but then has a mistress that lives in the house with them, which
Mm-hmm.
burning the
Mm-hmm.
world to the ground. And so, anyways, Rose ends up being admired by the son of the elder, right?
Yeah.
And she's like,
Uh-huh.
she's fully not
She has no idea
because
that he
she
thinks she's great, that
yeah
she's amazing, that he's crushing on her.
yeah because
Like
she's
she
stuck on
is
Adrian
so
and Dimitri.
oblivious.
Yeah,
Like so oblivious to this that it absolutely takes her by surprise when he starts mentioning how, oh, she could stay and they could get married and they could be together
they can have
and
kids, and she's like,
they could have
"Whoa,
kids.
there,
She's like, well,
buddy,
pump your brakes. Like
we're
slow down,
homies."
right? And then he goes to show her the cave
And it's so itty
that
bitty teeny.
itty bitty teeny cave. No big deal. That's how they live. Whatever. It's fine. He gives her a bracelet, right? And while they're in the cave, she's like, yo, listen, this, you and me, not gonna happen. Like, it's not gonna happen, but we can be friends. I would really like it if we could be friends. He's like, you know what? Cool, whatever. He takes it in stride. Totally cool with it, right? And then and then they get back to the rest of the people and his sister, who we've seen before, and she's comes off very aggressive and very like blunt,
Jumps
decides that
Rose.
she's just gonna go at it with Rose, and like they cannot. Rose is confused because Rose is like, I'm gonna hurt her. Like I'm gonna legit. Like I don't want to hurt her.
I am
Like
a bona fide guardian
yeah,
and really
I've
good
killed
at it.
Strigoi. Like I'm not what.
Yeah.
Then at the end of it, when Rose finally
Defeats
beats
her.
her,
Yeah.
she looks at Rose. She goes, "Okay, I guess you're good enough to marry my brother," and just lost it, lost it.
There's some key points
Absolutely.
here.
Dimitri,
Knows
by the way,
what
was
this fight is.
he knew the whole time what the fight was about, and I think he gained some sort of amusement out of
Yeah, well,
it.
because he goes to step in originally. Because
Yeah.
he, mind you, this is the same Dimitri that in Spirit Bound, when they go to arrest Rose, he takes out like 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just because he's like, Rose is in danger. And so when he sees Angeline jump in, he goes to step in, and somebody assumedly whispers to him, like, oh, she's fighting him because it's a custom to make sure that she is, good enough to marry her brother
Worthy.
and
Yeah.
all that.
Mm-hmm.
So he starts kind of smiling to himself, but he doesn't step in. So that makes Rose more confused.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Sydney is just absolutely
tickled. Yeah,
thriving.
she's
She
like,
knows exactly what's going on, and
yeah.
she is just tickled pink that this is happening. And
So
teases Rose about it after,
yeah.
which is great.
So this happens, right? And so then they leave, because they're like, this is gonna just keep happening. Somebody's gonna end up
Yeah.
going after Dimitri, and then I'm gonna get in a fight again. Like,
Yeah.
and so they leave because now they're going to track down um
Sonya.
Sonya, right? Which we get introduced to her in the first book, where we find out that she was a teacher. That is the reason that Rose and Lisa left St. Vladimir's,
Uh-huh.
and she ended up becoming a Strigoi, stuff like that. We find out she was a spirit user, so we get some sympathy in like why she would have become Strigoi. And when we get to her house, right? I love the fact that Sonya Karp became a Strigoi to avoid her demons, right? And she
Right.
just becomes a Strigoi, living her happy little life in her little house,
Yeah.
right? She's growing
With the
flowers.
garden. Yep.
Like, that she's killing to feed and stuff like that, but she's not living in like
It's not it's a stark contrast to Dimitri, who like was trying to become like
immediately went into
a
like the
mob
mafia.
boss.
Like
Yeah, like just a Strigoi mafia, like at his beck and call. And then you have Sonya Karp,
he's
who's
like,
like,
I'm chill by myself.
I'm good. I'm Gucci right next to my lake in my low blue house with
Yeah.
my garden. But they, oh, we can't forget to mention the two big
Ugh.
annoying elephants in the room,
Ugh.
which is Victor.
And his
Victor
stupid
is
brother
back,
Robert.
and his stupid brother Robert are back. Because they, I think Victor.
Oh, well, before we mention Victor, the reason. So they know that Rose escaped. Right. And
Of course,
so Victor's whole thing to Rose, because he and Robert interrupt her dreams to talk to
which
her.
was annoying for her.
Yeah.
She was not happy. She thought she was getting a dream with Adrian, and instead
Yeah.
there's Victor Dashkoff, and she's like,
Get out.
fine.
And so he basically tells her, like, you need to get Lisa nominated for Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And so this kind of starts enveloping whatever. And so she gets Adrian to bring this idea forward. And Lisa ends up becoming nominated to become the
Which,
next queen.
poor Lisa had no
Let a girl
idea
know.
that this was going to happen.
But I think it's funny because that was their whole thing that they did to Rose, because they didn't tell Rose
Right.
they were breaking her out. And so then
Right.
Lisa's like, why didn't you tell me? And they were like, actually.
Yeah, like,
It's kind of Rose
pump your
giving
brakes.
you taste of
Yeah,
the medicine.
like, like, pump your brakes. Which is, by the way, also a very amusing scene because Lisa is completely taken aback, has no idea this is
nominates
coming.
her. And then
Tasha, Christian, and Adrian.
yeah, Tasha says, I nominate Vasilisa for queen. Christian stands up and goes, I second this nomination. And then Adrian stands up and goes, I confirm this nomination. And it's all through a loophole because normally they're being confirmed through people in their bloodline, like their family.
Yes.
And so Nathan, Adrian's dad, is like, but she has no family to whatever. And then they're like, actually, it just says
Tasha's
that
like, she don't need family.
And then Abe steps in and goes, it just needed to be Royal Maroy. They're all royal. It works.
Yeah.
And so that was super fun.
And Nathan allows it because he knows
that she has no
without family,
yeah,
she can't actually, nobody can actually vote for her
mm-hmm.
for queen.
Yeah, so they're like, weird play,
he's like,
but
you know what? Fine, whatever. But it accomplishes what they initially set out to do, which was to buy Rose and team more time because they knew, and they were right, the second that her nomination was accepted, everything blew up over there. It was absolute chaos because as something that Rose and Lisa both discover sort of like while they're on their own paths is that a lot of the decisions that the royals are making are affecting non-royal Maroy, and the non-royals don't have the same amount of say that those with royal blood do. And Lisa has sort of like become this beacon
of change
for
and
non-royals.
hope.
Yeah, change. She is the Barack Obama in this story. Like, it's all about hope and change. And you know, a little less with the slaughtering and war and drone strikes, you know? So like it's just really interesting to see them both. They're both on their separate paths, but like the parallels between the two of them learning how the decisions that have been made have affected everybody.
Yeah.
Like Rose is thinking about it in the form of Dampiers and Guardians, and Lisa's thinking about non-royal Maroy and like how their lives are being drastically affected by the decisions being made by a small group of people.
Yep. And so Rose and the gang are trying to find Lisa's illegitimate half-sister because that changes the game for everything. Their goal, right, is not to make Lisa queen, but to make it to where she can vote and she can have power.
They want her on the council.
Yeah.
They don't really care about, like, Rose is like, she'd be a really great queen.
But
like,
that's not my goal. She's 18.
But
like,
no. Well,
That's a lot.
whatever. Like, we just need to find this
Hmm.
sibling so that
Yep.
we can get
And
her on the
it
council.
turns out to be jailbait. It turns out to be Jill Mastrano, who we've met for a couple books now. And she is the sister to Lisa.
Yes.
And
And I found it really interesting when Rose was like, I should have seen that
because her eyes
because
are
their
Agony
eyes
green.
are like exactly the same.
Yeah.
And once Rose realizes that Jill is Lisa's half sister, she's like, oh man, like it was right in front of me this whole time and I never
I think
saw it.
I think that conversation really comes into play for like showing. I think it's kind of Rochelle's way of being like, why didn't the characters notice this? You know? And so I think she very it like bluntly in the book is like, I'm gonna have Rose address this because my audience is gonna question
Yes.
like, how did we not notice?
But also, like, it really goes into the if they're not royal, you don't notice them sort of
Yeah.
like
And
plot
Rose didn't
point.
spend as much time with Jill because
No.
Jill came into the play when she
Right.
was off trying to
Right.
find Dimitri.
And to be fair, if anybody should be like, why didn't I realize this? It should be Christian
Yep.
and perhaps little Adrian because they spent the most time with Jill and they should have seen it.
Yep. Especially Christian. You know how often he's looking into those eyes?
I know, right?
Yeah. And so one thing that is being noticed is every time Rose is peeking into Lisa's mind and seeing what's going on, Adrian has some sort of vice, right? He's either drunk or he's been smoking or something like
Mhm.
that. And it starts to progressively annoy Rose. Um, because
It's
she's
always annoyed
it's always
Rose.
annoyed Rose, but he always cuts down when she's around. And so she starts getting annoyed that if she's not around, right, he's not taking good care of himself. He's not,
Right.
doing all these things. And I would like to say, and I've said this before, but both of them obviously were crutches for each other.
Yeah.
But I think even because this is a fandom that I've been involved with for like more than a decade, Rose does not get enough understanding for her point of view in it. Like she is very much, she tells Adrian, like, you can do great things, but you need to choose to do it for yourself. And he's very like, my girlfriend's cheating on me and now giving me a lecture, which I understood. Um, but it really shows that even though he's older than her, she still sees more than he does. I don't want to say she's necessarily more mature, but she is. Um,
And I also wonder how much of that is just like how spirit affects him in
yeah,
particular. Because I feel like Lisa also, like,
had her
at the
moments.
start of the series,
Yep.
especially, like, had her moments where she just came off so childish and so,
Yeah.
like, so I hate to say the word weak because she was never really weak, but
Mm-hmm.
like she believed herself to be weak.
Yep.
And thus she believed she couldn't actually like accomplish anything without Rose or do anything without Rose
Yeah.
there.
And
And
so
so
Adrian
like
had that same.
yeah, Adrian's having the same thing except whereas Lisa finally had that come
Oh,
to
like,
Jesus moment,
yeah.
like I can do this without Rose.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian's yet to have that.
Yeah. And so I think Rose was not right to cheat on Adrian.
No.
The way she even deals with the scene with Dimitri is crazy to me because she could have easily just been like, let's put a pin in this.
Yes.
Let me talk to Adrian, get all of this sorted. Right. And then I know that
You can do
because,
whatever you want with me later.
yeah, like I know that the audience that Rochelle is focusing on is the main reason the scene existed the way that it did because it's young adult teens, being like, oh, but they were in love, they couldn't wait, yada yada yada, right? But there are ways to be with the person you want without.
Let's take a better example than that.
Yeah. And so
If by
I
chance a
love.
teenager comes and listens to this, that is not okay.
Yeah.
That is not the way you handle a relationship. That is not the mature way to handle a relationship. Please don't take this
Yeah.
as some
Don't
sort of
use
like
this as a guide.
how-to guide. It's not.
um and so she and Dimitri sleep together while they're off, right? Towards like the end of their trip. Like they did not They would
No.
not have had to
Yeah.
wait
I
very
think it was,
long.
what, the night before they were going back to court or
Yeah.
something like that? Yeah.
And so it was really frustrating to me as a Rose and Dimitri lover, right? Like I love their growth throughout the relationship,
Mhm.
um, and stuff like that, is that they didn't need to do that to Adrian. And
No.
so I understood his anger.
It kind of tarnished the reunion for me, like, a little bit,
Yeah.
because it's like, man, like, that would have been so much better and sweeter to have happen after she broke things off with Adrian, because then it wouldn't feel so
Yeah.
grimy.
And so and the way that Adrian finds out is so
He knows. The second he sees the two of them
well because he
having a
sees
conversation off to the
well
side.
because Dimitri kisses her on the forehead
Yeah.
and he immediately is like, "Oh." You know? And like,
Yes.
oh,
He
I think
knows.
he immediately in that moment puts two and two together of like, "Oh crap, that's why her aura was shining so bright earlier." And
Yeah.
like that had to hurt more, I think.
Yeah.
And so Adrian and Rose have a really tough conversation, right? Which my only issue with this conversation, which is a valid question for him to have, is his whole idea of like, oh, was it happening before you left court? Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, I understood the question, but the answer was going to obviously be no. Like,
Yeah, but I think he needed to hear it. Like, I
yeah,
think he needed to be like, you know what, I need to know that this wasn't happening under my nose.
yeah. And I think he also just needed to be like told very bluntly, like, oh, I mean, it happened on this trip. Like, what was I expecting? Like, she was still very
Yeah.
much like getting over him. And I
Yeah.
basically told her to stay put with him until this was
Right.
all taken care of.
Right.
And so yeah, it's a really tough scene. Rose, I think, tells him a lot of really poignant things where she's like, you can do so much more. You are capable. And he's like,
He's not listening.
he's like,
He doesn't
I'm
care.
not going anywhere. I
Yeah.
drink, I smoke, whatever, all these things. He's basically, he's having a rightful pity party. Like, I think he needs to allow himself to feel his emotions, feel how crappy the
Yes.
situation was. But then
Yes.
Bucko needs to move on, you know?
Yes.
Like,
It's the only reason why I want to pick up the next series, because I want to be like, I want to see
yeah,
like how he is.
the next series definitely does show that growth. I didn't finish the next series. I don't remember if that's because I started to just dislike it or if because when I was reading it I was a teenager and I didn't have my own money.
Oh, it could
Um
be. Yeah.
but yeah, so they have a really touching scene and touching not in like a positive way. But one of those like bittersweet moments of like, oh, that really is I think a experience that so many people have at that age of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, didn't mean to hurt you, but you were not the one for me kind of thing.
Right.
And so he leaves. Um, Lisa becomes queen.
Yes.
And so Dimitri and Rose. Oh, okay. So at the coronation, right? Oh, let me back up. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're going, whew,
Okay.
pop the brakes there.
Sorry. So, well, because the Adrian conversation happened after
After all of
everything
that,
else.
yes.
Yes.
We're kind of
Yeah.
jumping
Sorry,
around, and
guys.
we're going
Um,
by plot point and storyline rather than by chapter.
yeah.
So bear with us here.
And so we have the murder mystery to solve, right? Queen Tatiana has been killed. They believe
Yes.
Rose did it.
Who
Who
killed
killed?
Queen Tatiana?
Yeah. Who killed the queen? And a
Do we
lot of,
actually want to mention it, or do we want to save that like as like a
we'll get there.
like? Okay.
So that is the whole like premise of it, right? Is they need to clear Rose's name. And so I really love no, I think we're just gonna have to say it honestly, because we can't really
Okay.
talk.
I will follow your lead on that,
Okay.
ma'am.
Well, because I was trying to say, like, there's a lot of foreshadowing in this one that really points.
I did not see it.
Oh, I have like multiple sticky notes that say, like, oh my god, the foreshadowing. Okay. So by the time they're coming back to court, they believe that Daniela Ivashkov, Adrian's mom, did it, right?
Yes.
Because they're like this she had reason, she had motive, she had access, right? And so Lisa and Rose, despite being on two different sides, are thinking the same thing. We find out that the queen was actually having like secret training sessions, right? And this was one of the biggest moments, I think, of foreshadowing for me, is they're telling people about these these secret training sessions, right? And Tasha Ozera is like, "Oh, I had no idea that was happening." And she
Right.
seems really distraught that this is happening, right? And I was
Right.
like, "Why would this lady be so distraught that the queen was actually doing these things in secret?" And so we find out that Lisa, during the right before the vote and whatever, is Rose and them show up, right? And they're like, "You can take us into prison, but
We'll go.
let us explain something first." Right? And so they go on to explain all of these things, and Lisa's like, "I actually have evidence to back them up." And Rose is like, "Wait, girl, we're talking two different pieces of evidence." Because by that point, Lisa believes it's Daniela, but Rose knows who the true killer is. And the true killer is actually Tasha Ozera, right? And so it's kind of a painful scene because Rose um obviously confronts her, right? Because the big tip that made them know that it was Tasha was that the person who describes the Moroi female that was constantly with the guard, right? And she has a very notable scar on her face. And so even Dimitri is like, "Man, like that evidence is really, really, really damning."
It is.
And so they go to confront Tasha, and she very quickly is like, "I've been saying you've been innocent this whole time." And Christian is obviously upset because that's his aunt that he loves. Not only is it his aunt, but it's the aunt that saved his life, you know? So he's very upset in that way. She kind of gives herself away a little bit because when Dimitri says extra evidence, right? She's like, "Dimka, you too?" And that's when it clicks for Rose, because Rose was like, "Why was I the one that was framed?"
Right.
And we find out that Tasha was still holding a candle for Dimitri
Correct.
and
Yep.
wanted Rose out of the picture.
Yep.
And Tasha does not help herself because in the next moment she has a gun and she is pointing it at a random Moroi, right? Which happens to be Mia Rinaldi. Richelle does a really good job at like full circle for a lot of things. Um,
Yes.
but unbeknownst to Tasha, or maybe beknownst to Tasha, we don't know. She picked the wrong Moroi because Mia has been learning how to fight and defend herself and all of these things. And then Lisa runs forward to get involved in the fray, right? And Tasha goes to shoot Lisa, and Rose, being Rose, is like, "This is not gonna fly,"
Yeah. No,
gets in
it
the
can't
way of
happen
the
like this.
bullet, right? And so what's is thought to be Rose's last moments is she's seeing Lisa and Dimitri's face, and she's like, "Okay, if I'm going
I'm
to
okay with
die,
this.
at least, I know my loved ones are safe, yada yada yada." And when she wakes up, she's bandaged, she seems to be okay. But the bond, ladies and gentlemen, and they thems,
Is gone.
the bond is gone. And so Dimitri is there, as we all expected. And he explains to her, because she's like, "Oh my God, Lisa healed me, didn't she?" And he goes, "Nope." And she was like, "Adrian?" And he goes, "Nope." And she goes,
Nope.
"Sonia?" And he goes, "Nope. You basically did it yourself. You just had that willpower, or whatever we want
Yeah.
to say, and
It was your own body.
your own body decided it was
Congratulations.
not your time to go." Um, and they have a really quick moment where she's like, "I'm sure that Adrian would not have healed me." And he's like, "You really think he would have abandoned you in that moment?" And so,
Yeah. Be so for real right now, please.
yeah. And so we find out that Lisa and Adrian both wanted to heal her, but that they were basically whisked away
Yeah.
until the threat
For
was cleared
safety.
and
For
stuff.
safety.
Yeah. And
For the record.
so the stuff with Tasha happens. Lisa gets voted in as queen,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so Dimitri and Rose have a really sweet moment because Dimitri's basically explaining to her, like, "When you were dying, I had all these realizations that I could
Yep.
forgive myself because I saw that you had truly forgiven me." But I have this realization, and then I thought that I was losing you, and that was painful, and yada yada yada. And they just have a really sweet moment, right? And so then Lisa comes in, and that is when Rose realizes the bond is gone, and Lisa kind of tells her everything that was going on. And they go on a walk back to Rose's room, and that is where she ends up having that really painful conversation with Adrian. And then he leaves. They go off to the coronation for Lisa, right? And it's
Which is a whole to-do.
It's a whole shebang, you know? And
They really
so,
go ham on these traditional.
well, to be fair, how often are they crowning a new queen, you know? These
That's
people
fair.
live for a long time. Rose
That's
even
fair.
says it, like, "Oh, I have never been to a coronation before, and I hope I'm never at one again, because I'm hoping there's, you know, only one queen during my lifetime." Um, and the coronation ends in a really sweet way, and it's a really good way to end, I think, this original series with Rose and Lisa and everything, because they have like a moment without the bond that they look at each other, and Dimitri's like, "You good?" And she was like, "Oh, I think that we're both thinking the same thing of like what Lisa would say if she had the bond right now." And he like sweeps her into his arms, and he goes, "What do you think she would say?" And it was something about like, you know, what did we get
What
ourselves
trouble are
into?
we? Yeah.
And it was such a cute way to end the series. Because one, it shows the growth of all of the characters, right? There's no more obvious growth than Lisa becoming queen, Christian becoming a man that has to be held to high esteem because now he's going to be the queen's consort, right? Until they're married, and, you know, whatever that looks like. Um, Janine and her dad
Are
are,
so stinking cute
yeah,
together.
like, I don't know if
I
they're back
can't.
together. I don't know what that is, right? But they are.
No, but the way they're both like, we want to know
We want to know about
when
your
this.
time at St. Vladimir's.
Yeah,
Because the math is not mathing.
Abe's like, I bet Dimitri likes to go hunting. We can go hunting together.
Yeah.
And Janine's just like, I don't know about hunting, but I do have some questions.
Yeah, and it's the questions that I think any adult would have, because they were like, "Excuse me, 1 + 1 is 2. She's been
Yeah.
18 for a couple months, and during those months, you were not with her." Which they could have spun it, right? They could have been like, "I went to Russia because he was my teacher, and I felt I owed it to him," right? And then Dimitri started having feelings for her because of everything she did to bring him back, yada yada yada, right? They could have spun it, but obviously they're not going to, because they're not going to lie to everybody involved and yada yada.
No,
Um
that wouldn't have made any sense either.
but so they obviously show the character growth because Janine is now obviously more involved in her daughter's life. Abe is now involved in his daughter's life.
He
You
called him dad.
Yeah. You've got the character growth of Rose, right? Where she has finally become what she had the goal of she has finally become Lisa's guardian, right? Not only is she Lisa's guardian, but Dimitri is Christian's
Dimitri is
guardian,
Christian's
so
guardian.
they're going to basically live happily ever after, because they're going to very rarely be apart unless Lisa's going to college, because we find out she's still going to college at Lehigh. And all of that. But it brings in all this character growth, but also shows that they are still the
At the end of
same,
the
you
day,
know? They're
yeah.
still Rose and Lisa. So they're like, even in these positions of immense power, like, they're still a little mischievous. They're still like, the world is now open to us, but in a lot more elevated way, because now Lisa obviously is going to be in politics and all of these things. It opens the door for the sequel series, right? So we find out that Jill is going to be under protection, because if she were to die, Lisa would not be able to be queen, and everything would, you know, fall apart. So she's going to be under protection. And so we know, or well, I'll say Kayla and I know. You guys probably won't know. But the sequel series follows Sydney, right? And we kind of learn more about the alchemists and that society, right? That cult, really. And it follows Sydney and Adrian. There's also Eddie in it. Jill's in it. It's a, they're off on their own adventure.
Yeah.
But Rose, Dimitri, Lisa, all of them are obviously prominently mentioned because, it's still their universe.
Yep.
There's a short story that I'm going to read shortly because I'm curious. That follows Rose and Dimitri after everything. And so that'll be really fun. We have yet to decide if we're going to be reading that second series. I know it's shorter than the other one, but we'll talk about that off.
It's still
episode.
6 books.
Oh, yeah. See, I think I have 2 of them. So we'll see. But we have concluded the Vampire Academy series. Overall, my favorite book
I'm
was
still annoyed with
probably.
you.
I'm looking.
Looking to torment me some more.
See, I do think my favorite book is either the last 2, Spiritbound or Last Sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the first one is good, but it's too young for me to really hold on to. The second book, I think the only thing that is of major relevance is Mason's death because it kind of catapults everything else.
Correct.
Shadow Kiss is kind of just a rough one to get through. Blood Promise is rough because of all of the Strigoi Dimitri scenes in Rose, and then the last 2 I think are really nice. But this has been another episode of Margin Mavens. We appreciate you for being here. We will hope to see you in the next episode.